Hey everyone, and welcome back to Leaders on Purpose podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited because this is a conversation I have been looking forward to for 2 months now. Today, we have the honor of sitting down with the remarkable Aviva Steinberger. She is the Director of Innovation Diplomacy at Startup Nation Central and a true leader who has a very special talent for attracting and pioneering first-time experiences. And you'll see why in just a second. We both met in Marrakech during a 3-day event that she put together with her team and partners, the first of its kind, really. And also, do you remember the first time that we took Leaders on Purpose podcast out of Casablanca to another city? Well, she was the one who made it possible. She was part of that first time also. We recorded a great episode with Google. Go check the I Am Remarkable episode with Donna Raz Levy. It is definitely worth your time. And so today, as we sit here in our brand new studios, I couldn't be more thrilled because she's here with me for the very first episode we're recording from this space. Aviva, welcome to Leaders on Purpose podcast.
Thank you so much, Manal. I love the studio. It's gorgeous.
Thank you. It is such an honor to have you. I mentioned we both met at this wonderful experience, really, that you put together. I recall nearly 100 women, business leaders from the whole region gathered at Women Connect to Innovate in Marrakech. I really met wonderful ladies, friends, some I could call friends now, from Egypt, Bahrain, Israel, Palestine, Kenya, Nigeria, Sudan, and many, many other places in the region. And I also remember that really the whole group definitely left energized and hopeful and empowered. Can you first tell us how did you design Women Connect to Innovate and what was the idea behind?
Sure. Women Connect to Innovate came on the heels of a few other events that we've been doing at Startup Nation Central in the region in the context of changing dynamics in the region and normalization agreements. We've found ourselves in a position where we can engage in different ways with a focus on innovation, driving the creation of resilient relationships between different stakeholders in the countries. And we had done an event with our partner in Morocco in Casablanca the year before. We had done an event in Manama. We did an event in Israel in collaboration with the Emirates. And so in that context, it became very clear that there was something specific about the connections being forged between the women that were attending these events. There was a unique curiosity and a unique access to opportunities for women in the region to connect at this level. And so we started looking at what would happen if we were to take women changemakers, female changemakers who share a passion for creating change, for a passion for leadership, share values around leadership, and put them together for a few days of thoughtful dialogue and see what comes of it. And it was really kind of an experiment almost. And I don't think we realized just how thirsty some of these women were to create these kinds of connections, both outside of their own societies, cultures, and countries, and looking across the region. You mentioned the countries. There were 17 countries represented there across the Middle East and Africa. And creating these connections really became an environment where people started thinking about what could be some really impactful business outcomes through these kinds of connections. Different from some of the other events that we had done at Startup Nation Central and under a similar brand of Connect to Innovate, the women's focus was obviously for women alone, but it also looked cross-regionally and not just bilaterally. And it was designed with this kind of non-conference intention, where it wasn't a series of panels and keynote speakers and workshops after workshops. The whole design went into looking at what happens when you go to a conference. The most interesting part of the conference is what happens on the side, in the hall, and over
True.
coffee. And so the idea was to bring that into the room. And, I think you're probably familiar with the question because we got it from everybody when we were leading up to the event. Who are the keynote speakers?
Yeah.
And what we ended up doing was we had almost 100 keynote speakers where each one of the participants could have stood on stage in their own right, opposite an audience of 700 influential business leaders. And we created this space where people were sharing their stories, sharing their journeys to business success, journeys to leadership, and understanding where there were similarities and where there were differences and where we had our own individual paths to success. So the idea was to kind of harness that in 3 days and see what can come out of those kinds of connections.
Yeah, well, it was definitely not the typical conference we're all used to. And probably, why don't you take us through those 3 days, especially for the audience who wasn't there? So can you break down like the 3 days for us?
Yeah. We started off with a storytelling session, almost like a story slam, but Moroccan style, because it was modeled after the ancient Moroccan tradition of hikayat, which is storytelling. And there were 5 women participants who had done training before the gathering to learn about what does it mean to tell a story in this fashion. And we all sat around in a circle and listened to individual journeys, some of them harrowing challenges and personal challenges that they faced from childhood, and all of a sudden, what do you do with opportunity, and how do you break through different glass ceilings and other ceilings and barriers that are put before you? And it really was just sort of an opening and an invitation that people bring their vulnerabilities into the room.
Yeah.
And that there's a connection between your personal journey and your professional journey. And so we started with that and then led into workshops that focused on access to investment opportunities. And what does it mean to be a decision maker sitting around the table making investment decisions? Or what does it mean to be on the entrepreneurial side seeking investment? And how does one person's experience from Egypt maybe shed light on someone else's experience in Bahrain, for example, or in Israel, or as we said, in all of the countries represented there? Another session was on education. Thinking about not just what do we need to learn and where can we create more opportunities around education, but also sometimes what do we need to unlearn in order to recognize where innovation can play a really powerful role in forging our future and the future of our children. And another piece was focused also on infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean not only physical infrastructure and the constructs that make up our lives, whether it's government and regulation, but also society and culture and religion. So in all of this was an arc of, this isn't just about you when you're wearing your professional hat. This isn't just you when you are in your professional role, but it's all of the different aspects that make up who we are as individuals. And that was the invitation, that people come wearing all of their different hats in society, in their families, in their businesses, in their volunteering roles, in all of the roles that they play. We brought everybody out to the desert for
very early in the morning.
Yeah, we were debating. We're not going to make too many friends by bringing very high-powered women out at 6 a.m. to catch the sunrise.
It was wonderful. Yeah,
it was wonderful. There's magic to being out there and just seeing everyone experience that together. And we did an activity called Vision Circles, where everybody was invited to imagine what the future can look like. Their own personal future, the professional future, or the future of the region. And there's something about bringing your voice to that vision and sharing that vision with others that you've developed a relationship with, even over just a short amount of time, vocalizing your ideas in order to see where they carry you into the future. And we're already hearing, it's been a few months. We got together in May, and now we are in August, the end of August. And I'm hearing some amazing feedback of people that have been taking trips and writing books and doing things that they never thought they would actually do, but there was just something powerful in vocalizing it and sharing that experience. Another interesting activity that we did, we actually had a graffiti collaboration where graffiti artists from Israel, a graffiti artist from Senegal, and an artist from Morocco did a collaboration focused on the values that we were talking about during the event. And we did this whole unveil that the city of Marrakech donated a wall in their cultural center to this graffiti work. And so we saw that unveiling, and there's just really the power of bringing in art and different forms of articulating leadership into the discussion. So as you can see, there's just a little bit of a flavor of the different kinds of activities that we did that create very powerful experiences and connections, all with the underlying objective of understanding where business potential, business collaboration can come out of this.
Yeah, and I'll put some links to a few articles and also our social media if you're interested in learning more and seeing pictures of this whole experience. We'll definitely put some links for you in the show notes of this episode. Now, Aviva, as you know, we're really in this era of building communities and digital communities, industry communities, and I know this question might be challenging, but I feel it's really important one. How can we quantify and what kind of KPIs can we put in place in order to measure the benefits of such initiatives? From a funder standpoint, you mentioned the funder standpoint, but also from a participant standpoint. I feel this is really a core question that many of us could relate to and also benefit from. What's your perspective on that?
Such an important question. First of all, on community, it's become a buzzword. We use the term community very loosely. And I feel that when we talk about community, it's not just about a group of people that have shared an experience together. To forge a community, there has to be both give and take at the very individual level. Everybody feels that they're giving, that they're contributing, and everybody feels like they're gaining. And I think in that definition of community, for me at least, lies the KPI for something like this, and bringing people together with a real intention that everybody's going to get something out of it and everyone's going to have what to contribute, so that it was worth my time, and it will be worth the time of the people that I invite to join this community in the future, because it's bringing value to their business and because they're providing value to other people's business. And so a KPI for something like this is really about not the experience itself. The experience itself, the connection itself, the event is a jumping off point to then understand, well, what do we do with it now? Now that we have these connections, do we leave it there? And I'll be the first to admit, when we were first designing this and kind of putting it out there, we didn't know how it would land. It really was the first of its kind type of event. And for us as an organization, but also recognizing where we are in the geopolitical environment, understanding what the potential could be when you create these kinds of connections. And at the beginning, it was like, let's just make sure it happens. And once it happens, then start thinking about it. And now I can say very confidently that the KPIs for bringing people together and spending their time and sharing their networks is really about, where is this adding value to my own society, to my economy? How can this activity and these relationships continue to foster prosperity? And that's really, I think, something that one could bring to a donor, one could bring to a business sponsor, one could bring to a corporate partner, and say, these are the kinds of people-to-people relationships that will continue to drive for concrete partnerships. And that's really what we're after now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do think it's a very important initiative for female leadership in the region. And it is also really setting the stage for many empowering collaborations to follow. Now, before we dig in deeper into the topic of today, which, as you know, is bring the whole you and embracing our whole self with all its facets, tell us about your journey, especially, your personal growth journey. You're a very passionate professional, you're purpose driven, you're a wife, a daughter, a mom of four. How do you navigate these different roles while staying true to yourself and your aspirations?
Well, that's such a weighty question. So I'll start with my personal journey. I grew up in New York. At age 18, I came to Israel to spend time for a year after high school, and I fell in love with the country. Spent probably, I think it was about 6 years staying in Israel, did my studies in Israel and international relations, and eventually made my way back to New York. It was right after, it was right before 9/11.
Yeah.
And on 9/11, I had an interview downtown for a job. I wasn't there, it was in the afternoon. But what I didn't realize was how personally I would be affected by the day. But interestingly enough, from a career standpoint, shortly after that, I started work at the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And the state had just received federal funding for business recovery of Lower Manhattan. And because the world hadn't had anything like that at that scale before, it was sort of new to everybody. So even though I was a very young professional, I was just as experienced as anybody else would have been in understanding how to address that from a business community standpoint. And we opened up a walk-in center at Ground Zero. And I kind of fell into what would be the next 9 years of my professional journey, which turned out to be, to date, one of the more transformational leadership roles I've been exposed to. And I realized that without getting up to work every day with a sense of passion and purpose, 9 to 5 wasn't going to work for me. And that's really where I started unpacking what does it mean to be in the context of multiple stakeholders? How do you create programming that addresses very vital, sensitive needs, but understands that there are different interests and different goals with the different parties that you're going to be working with? And over time, I evolved in my role a little bit, and then at the time I was married with 2 kids, and realized that I wanted to come back to Israel. My husband and I had known for a while that that was the direction, and moved to Israel. It was in 2009. Moved back to Israel the second time, and spent time. So I had been in government, and then when I'm back in Israel, spent time in nonprofit. And really came to understand for myself that I like to find roles that haven't been chartered before. I have yet to have a job that has, a list of responsibilities on day one. And I've come to learn that that's just what works for me. So I know in your introduction, I was flattered to hear, but this sort of new experiences. So new experiences for myself and professionally are ones that I seek out. So that's my personal journey in getting to where I am now at Startup Nation Central. We're a nonprofit organization, non-revenue organization, non-government organization focused on ensuring the health of the Israeli tech ecosystem and connecting it with key stakeholders around the world so that Israeli technology can play a role in addressing global challenges. And I feel very passionate about the work that I'm doing in my role in innovation diplomacy. There's a lot about connecting with leaders in different countries and on different issues that are relevant to everybody's day to day. And so I get up in the morning feeling very passionate. Where that meets my other passions in life and my 4 children, God bless them, and my husband, and the elusive balance. I still haven't figured it out. But you do what you can every day and give the most of yourself to as much as you can, and maintain yourself as a priority in all of that. So it's not easy. I don't have the answer to finding balance.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's definitely a journey, and embracing our wholeness and also the self-acceptance is definitely a journey. Can you probably share with us if there was like a defining moment in your personal growth journey that led to, let's say, a realization or transformation into bringing together the personal and the professional?
Yeah, I would say there were two things that kind of happened simultaneously. One is I was part of a fellowship journey that focused a lot on professional leadership. And we did this assessment, and in that assessment, I scored fairly low on authenticity in the workforce. And I share that with you not so easily. It's hard to say something like that about yourself.
Thank you for sharing that.
I felt like, this is me, and yet I'm being received by my peers as inauthentic. And at the same time, when I was sort of processing that, I was on a work call at home, and my husband made a joke about, he could tell I was on a work call because I have my Aviva work voice and I have my Aviva other voice. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, there's something that is, I'm creating a barrier with how I'm bringing myself to work. Maybe because I feel like I need to put on this kind of pose that's different from who I am at home and in other roles that I wear. But it wasn't working for me. Clearly, I thought it was working for me, and it wasn't working for me. And that to me was an aha moment of, okay, I need to maybe make a shift here and try on what would it feel like to bring to blur that line a little bit and bring more of my whole self to my professional career, and quite frankly, the other way around. What else can I bring from how I bring myself to work that might be helpful at home? And I started playing with trying on different roles or different ways to do that. And for me, I think it has definitely been instrumental in my career journey. And today I feel like I can safely say that there's a lot of blurring of the lines. And it's risky to do that, because then it comes back to that first question that you asked about balance. Because once you start blurring the lines, it might be a little bit easier to find that, more difficult to find that balance. But for me, it hasn't been the case. For me, finding the balance is, okay, this is who I am right now in all of what I'm doing today. And then you can take stock in how you're spending your time a little bit more authentically.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading this great article. Herminia Ibarra, she's a professor at INSEAD, and she wrote this great article on HBR called The Authenticity Paradox. And one of the points she made that really resonated for me was that when you think about authenticity, particularly someone who is closer to the beginning of their career than the end of their career, you have to try on different personas to see which one feels more comfortable. Because, the person who just graduated from college or university a few years ago probably isn't going to be the one that thrives in any workplace, right? You learn, you grow, you figure it out, you bump into a few things, and then you find the right way forward for yourself. And I remember really when I started in the consulting industry, there was a clear cut between personal and professional. And I just thought that's how it was supposed to be. Now, as you said also, and I resonate with that very much, as I evolved in my personal growth journey, my perspective on that started to change. And I also really felt inspired by people who were open, authentic, real, but not just when everything was going their way and everything was right and they were happy. Also when, authentic in their doubts, the moments of doubt or vulnerability. And that to me felt more aligned with the person I wanted to be, and also the kind of role model I wanted to model for my kids. So really, it's an evolving journey, and I think her approach on adopting and an adaptive authenticity style and experimenting different leadership approaches can work for some of us. Does that resonate for you as well?
Yeah, I'm nodding my head. It resonates completely. For me, I think that there's the fine line, though, and you have to know where that line is for yourself. Vulnerability is something that I value, and I think I bring to my everyday. I'm not necessarily afraid of being vulnerable in the workplace, or as a mother for that matter, or a wife or a friend or a daughter. But at the same time, maintaining the right level of professionalism, which is also really important. We don't want to break down entirely in the workplace, but we have to understand where those lines are. So absolutely, I think that, and that speaks to what you're citing as that adaptive authenticity. I love it.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of beliefs, and we all have different understanding, and we all come from different cultural backgrounds. Also, you mentioned, I loved it. Thank you for sharing this anecdote with your husband. Immediately identifying work Aviva and not work Aviva, but based on your body language, the tone of your voice, and so on. That is so relatable. I think a lot of us, we do that. Can you help us articulate the belief and the thought process behind that decision for some of us to show up differently in our personal life and our professional life?
I wonder if some of that is also gender related, where maybe as women we feel like if we're sitting around a table of decision makers, and we need to show up differently professionally. And I wonder out loud, because I think for me it does ring true.
Okay.
And I can't speak for others, but I would imagine that finds a home in some people's understanding. And also that vulnerability piece, this kind of being scared of being vulnerable in the workplace means that you've got to put on a different pose. It reminds me of if you've ever heard Beyonce talk about who she is off stage versus
Sasha Fierce, right?
Sasha Fierce, yeah, it's who's Sasha Fierce on stage. And it's interesting because on the one hand, there's a lot of power in trying on different personas. And I think it takes a lot of work to understand where is that helpful to you, and then where does it stray too far from your authentic self. When we put out the invitation to the women that were attending Connect to Innovate, we said the invitation to them was leave a lot of room in your bag for all the different hats you wear. Because when we're having a conversation, and even in this conversation I'm having with you now, I am Aviva on this podcast, and humbled to be your guest. And I am thinking about the meeting that I just had, the meeting I'm about to have. And did my daughter take the swim cap to the pool that she was supposed to take today? And what are we having for dinner? And I'm about to entertain 20 people over the weekend. Like all of the different things that we do, plus my volunteering role. And, and that's just me in this minute. And I think is probably many, many people everywhere, and certainly many women everywhere. And so the invitation is bring that into the room. Because I'm a better professional when I'm also calling on my strengths as a mom and a sister and a friend. And I'm a better mom, sister, and friend when I'm calling on my strengths as a professional. And that's what I mean by blurring the lines and finding that space where you can bring the whole you.
Yeah, absolutely. There is the gender bias. I agree with that. There is that perspective. And I would add on also probably the belief for some of us that authenticity, vulnerability is associated with weakness. And maybe we at some point have been taught or that bringing emotions to the workplace is unprofessional. And which really we need to, unwrap that and talk about it. And really, because the reality is, it is also healthy for professional relationships to know how to, bring your emotions in a professional way. Like it's okay to be angry. It's okay. I'm not talking about someone that is, screaming all over the place. But anger is a signal of something that is not aligned with your values. And so when you can stand up and express that in a way that is acceptable, of course, in the work, that is something we need in order to bring on different perspective. Or emotions are signals also. And so, the emotion mastery, I think we should have more lessons and more courses about that at school. And we're really not equipped before we enter the workplace. So I think there is a lot to unpack there and a lot to work on. And it's really, really fascinating. Maybe before we move on to the next segment, let's talk about how we can bridge the gap between these aspects and, bringing our authentic selves to both spheres. What are some of the insights or key lessons that you've learned about leading with authenticity and bringing your whole self to work? Is there anything you could share with us that could be helpful?
Well, you mentioned something just a second ago about learning how to do this better. And I don't think that I was equipped while I was in school with the skills needed to be emotionally intelligent at work and understanding organizational cues and cues that would allow me to bring my whole self into the workplace. And I think it's really interesting to understand what kind of lessons can be taught. One of the things that I think is probably the best way to learn or to help young professionals learn how to do that is being exposed to leaders who have done it and have done it successfully, which is, by the way, one of the goals that we had in bringing these women from across the region together, especially women, and especially in this region. There not being that many models to look to and understand, oh, this is someone I can relate to because they've had either similar challenges or relatable challenges to the ones that I'm facing. And I think in the Middle East and in Africa, it's different from the kinds of challenges that young professional women are exposed to in the West. And I think that there's a lot that we could do in modeling. There's a lot that we could do in sharing the stories and being mentors for not even just young professionals, but mentors for other professional women who can create that space. And I think supporting the growth of other women around you so that they can pursue their professional goals, that's a big win. Helping other people do what they're seeking out to do, where you can boost them up and do it while you yourself are bringing your authentic self to bear. Modeling for me, I think, is key.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Creating the space for one another, to bring those emotions. Aviva, Donna Razlevi from Google mentioned the psychological safety. I think that's also a big one. So creating an environment with enough psychological safety for everyone to bring their whole self is really important. And, just creating the space and helping each other is also a big win. I agree with that. Aviva, you've been involved in many really important initiatives that create positive impacts. You mentioned also the recovery after 9/11. What advice would you have for individuals seeking to lead purposeful projects and make a difference in their communities?
I think at an individual level, but also an organizational level, it's really key to see who else is doing what and who are the partners that you could bring in very often we see, we'll do like a stakeholder mapping and see who else is in my immediate space that I can work on with this. And I like to tune my own sensors and encourage others to tune their sensors and see who else is out there, what else is going on, and widen that mapping to see who could be potential partners. So if I think back about the work that we did quite a while ago now, but in Lower Manhattan, and since any project that I've been involved in, there's a lot of value, not just for the purpose of gaining buy-in, which is critical, but also to be better. You bring in the different voices. It's challenging because it requires you also to maybe loosen the reins of what ownership of an idea looks like, because the more partners you bring in, you lose a little bit of kind of your hold on the initial idea or your vision, because you're inviting other people's ideas and visions into the mix. But that just makes it stronger. So step one for me is always looking at who else is in this space, who else cares about this, who else might care about it if they knew it, and how can I engage different voices for inputs and insights.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Before we wrap up, Aviva, there are 3 quick questions I usually ask all my guests. So first question, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever been given?
The best piece of advice I was given was, you can have it all, just not all at the same time. I was given this advice when I was at a personal juncture of trying to decide on a specific dream job that I had been after, and I got an offer and I wanted it so badly. But I was also a young mother with 2 young kids, and I knew that this job would be very challenging on my schedule and my attention and my ability to be the kind of mother I wanted to be in that moment. And I was really angry even that I hadn't been prepared for having to make that decision. I'm lucky enough to have been brought up in an environment where, as a young girl, I was told, go for it, dream big.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, wait, but I got it. I got the thing I was going for, but I also got this other thing I've been going for, and I couldn't reconcile the two. And that piece of advice that was given to me, don't worry, you can have it all, it's just not all going to be right now, allowed me to make a decision that felt right for me in that moment.
Yeah, I like that very much. It brings a lot of peace, knowing that you can have it all, but not at the same time. As you said, especially for women, the professional curve and the personal curve do not go hand in hand, because by the time you're at your peak professionally, it's also the time where you want to have a family, for those who choose to do so. So it's really, I love that piece of advice. You can have it all, but not at the same time. Thanks. Okay, now what is the worst piece of advice that you have ever been given? I'm curious to learn about this one also.
The worst piece of advice would have to be, Aviva, don't be so ambitious.
Let me guess. Was it a male CEO saying that to you?
It may have been. It's a hard one to swallow, and tied to the first one where you want it all, and being told, maybe you shouldn't want, and that didn't sit right with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can totally understand why. Okay, last and final question for you, Aviva. If by magic you could create one rule, one law, one habit that absolutely everyone on this planet had to follow, what would that be?
Wow, I love that one. It would be just when you think you're sure of yourself and you know the answer, you have to stop, pause, do another listening tour to get different perspectives, and then come to a decision that you feel, even if you're only 80% sure of, is good enough. If you're too sure of something, there are always multiple sides, multiple angles and perspectives. You need to widen your scope of input. So that would be, if I could wave a magic wand before any decisions are made, stop, listen, revisit, tweak potentially, and then go forward with the confidence that you need.
Aviva, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I will put the handle of your LinkedIn in the show notes of this episode. If anyone wants to reach out to Aviva, please do so. Share your feedback with us on this episode. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.